order to begin, we're gonna have to go back in time. Remember the Boston Massacre? Yeah, neither do I. I wasn't there. But when we read about it, we learn that it happened in Boston. That's true. We learn that 5 people died. That's also true. But a massacre? Why did they use the word massacre? Like, huh? Now, I don't want to downplay the death of 5 people, but to put it into perspective, some car accidents have a way higher fatality rate than 5 people. You could go on an ill-fated river rafting trip, and more people than 5 could die, easily. Honestly, it's an example of how words can be used to stir up different reactions in people. I mean, it gets the people going, it's dramatic, it sells. And it definitely got the people going. There were massive outcries. The press used this event to slander the British and make the occupation of Boston look, in some ways, worse than it actually was. But the past is just as complex as the present is. During the time of the Revolution, there were very different opinions on whether or not to go to war with England. Now, of course, you had your diehards that supported it and your diehards that were against it, but most people were neutral and rightfully apprehensive about going to war with the strongest and mightiest military the world had ever known at the time. And I know it seems ridiculous now, but them wearing red uniforms was actually a flex on a flex. Dyed fabric was a serious indicator of social status back then, and they were not afraid to show you. Now, I'm sure you've heard the saying that history is written by the victors. That is true. America defeated the British, so instead of the British, who called it the incident on King Street, America named it the Boston Massacre. And I mean, it does slightly fit the definition. It's not wrong, it's just hyperbolic. And it worked. The Boston Massacre became a rallying cry. It was an event that shaped an entire generation.
Just got 2 words for you.
Incitement.
Incitement.
Inciting.
Inciting.
Incited by the president.
Incitement. Incitement.
It was an insurrection.
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 This is a human condition. You say it and say it and say it and say it.
It looks like article number 1 will be charging President Trump with incitement to riot.
Senators will have to decide if they believe Donald John Trump incited the election.
No, wait, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Hold on, that's not it. Oh, this is it.
Insurrection against the United States.
Fuck. Oh my.
So we got 2 words to go over: incitement and insurrection. The word insurrection here is similar to the word massacre when describing the Boston Massacre. In a vague sense, it fits the definition, but it is hyperbolic and dramatic. So the second word is incitement, which is an interesting word because of its different meanings. And in a vague sense, it can be applied here. But if you want to legally convict someone of criminal incitement, the bar becomes higher because you're going to have to look at the actual words and phrases used, and then you're going to have the burden of correlating those words and phrases with actual crimes that were committed. And we're going to try to do that in a little bit, but before we do, I want to make 2 points. The first point is that political speech is regarded as a very, very protected form of speech. And it's assumed that there's going to be fiery and passionate language that is actually intended to get people excited and riled up. And the second point, and it needs to be said, is that Although, yes, it's very rare for a president or politician to call
Bullshit.
It has happened before, and it will most likely happen again in some form. Man, remember these I Spy books? I hope these are still popular. So the goal is to find a random object that's listed, but it's hidden in this mess of other objects. So I'm going to take that approach to look for like hard evidence of criminal incitement in this speech that Donald Trump gave right before the riots. So the speech is actually kind of long, so I ended up clipping a few examples of some of the more inflammatory rhetoric that could be construed as incitement. And number one.
You have to get your people to fight. And if they don't fight, we have to primary the hell out of the ones that don't fight. You primary them, we're gonna let you know who they are.
So the word fight actually comes up many times in this speech. And I just can't see it being interpreted as literal violence because the word fight is used in this sense all the time.
That election, our election, was over at 10 o'clock in the evening. We're leading Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, by hundreds of thousands of votes. And then late in the evening or early in the morning, boom, these explosions of bullshit. And all of a sudden...
Now, I did mention that it's rare for a politician to do this, but Donald Trump does take the trophy for being the first one to literally say
Bullshit.
And so let's weigh this out. It did look like Donald Trump was going to win on election night. And this is going to sound controversial, but it's not. The election was weird. It was a weird year. Everything about 2020 was different, strange, and unusual. And on top of everything, it took the Associated Press longer than 3 days just to call a projected winner. Now, with all that said, do any of these irregularities prove that the election was stolen or rigged or the result of some nefarious plot? No, it doesn't. But is it completely outside of the realm of possibility? I don't know. A lot of things are possible. But again, it's easier to blame others or to hyperbolize the motives of the other side. And that's why the patriots who wanted the revolution to happen saw this as an opportunity to make the British look bad and get more support for their cause. But since the British and the British sympathizers, the loyalists, were on the other side of the event, they saw it entirely differently. They smack us in the press as though we were all there in Boston that day.
So that's how it's gonna be. Y'all wanna play.
Have they considered that maybe those protesters got exactly what they deserved? So be it then. We shall crush your little rebellion and remind you of the rabble that you truly are. Alright.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
So, a couple things here. First, the blatant use of the words peacefully and patriotically. And he did direct them, we're going to go to the Capitol, but you have to realize the speech is being given at the ellipse of the White House, which is like 1.5 miles away from the U.S. Capitol building. So, you have to know these things, right? If you don't watch the speech and you rely on the news media to give you a curated version and they happen to leave out the words peacefully and patriotically, it's going to be a lot easier to convince you that their narrative is true and that this man incited an insurrection on one of the darkest days in American history. Look, it's totally fine for you to hate the president and not like his supporters, that's fine. But if you're going to equate two things that just aren't really equatable, that's where we have a problem. The truth is, Donald Trump and his presidency and his supporters are all full of that word that I've been saying this whole time. Nuance. Man, this is like the first real video I've ever made, and look at this clip. I found this from years ago. Oh yeah, last one. Let's go.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
This one could be interpreted in the most sinister way, but you would have to play some mental gymnastics to do so.
This is where we fight! This is where they die!
The speech just wasn't that dramatic. The words are kind of vague political rhetoric, and they're not that bad. What was bad, though, was this idea of storming the Capitol. It was totally
delusional.
And they should be prosecuted. It's not okay. You need to have a peaceful assembly. That's the whole point.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I mean, that's a good point. Where does it say that? Did they leave that out? Did we miss something? So in a protest, if you break the law, like in this case, these people should be going to jail or prison depending on their crime. But just to add to the nuance of the situation, there was such a weak display of police and security that a lot of people just walked into the building. They're just waving flags, they're taking selfies, they're taking pictures. It's kind of clear that a lot of people don't even know what's going on. And the fact that this was allowed to happen is seriously mind-boggling. These guys were so underprepared and just looked so weak in their attempt to secure the building that to blame this on incitement from Donald Trump's words is sort of missing the point. And don't get me wrong, what happened on the 6th was a bad thing. I remember being disgusted when I watched it, but at the same time, it isn't what you're being told it was. Inflaming emotions is not a crime. And I know it's easy and tempting and convenient to just label the entire other side as evil, but that is a mistake.
Because 74 million Trump voters are not self-deporting, and neither are we.
The White House with the latest on the Capitol siege fallout.
And here it is, ladies and gentlemen. The clown show that is the insurrection.
Okay, that's enough with the
Bullshit.
All jokes aside, there were some scary images that day, but the scary images don't tell the whole story. Sometimes people have a very set way of looking at the world, and this causes them to seek out information that will confirm their viewpoints while ignoring evidence to the contrary. And to add to that, sometimes we're limited by our own perspective. Your truth does feel real, but it is subjective. Words are made up. So is time. So is measurement. Our entire language and all languages are made up. Every idea that is conveyed through any language is technically a social construct. And because of this, there's a natural ambiguity or negotiation between the meanings of things. And that's not a bad thing. That's what makes art and literature possible. So wait, how do we get a reality if one person's massacre is another person's incident and one person's fascist is another person's best president of the United States? Well, the answer came after the Enlightenment. People decided to apply scientific ideas like standardization to the English language. The concept of objectivity is itself a social construct, but does that mean it's not real? Ask an engineer. Standardizing language was an evolutionary adaptation. It allowed us to call out hyperbole like this.
You will go down in history as unequivocally and inarguably the worst president in American history.
People are constantly calling me untruthful or that I'm exaggerating. So there's a great irony in that.
fucking hey, man.
All right, here we go. Best for last. This guy is
100 pounds of nothing. 5 feet nothing.
I can't imagine the amount of satirical headlines that could be made with this. He's just walking in, by the way. He's walking in full costume. It's amazing. This photo may as well be a Halloween costume party at a college dorm. Again, I was appalled at the police's failure to secure the building, but I felt bad for this guy. He was all alone. There were so many of them, and his leadership failed him. Now, I don't want to downplay the deaths with making fun of this clown, but this event was not as bad as the media was pretending it to be. It could have been horrific. And when I say pretending, I don't mean it's completely fake, but it is exaggerated. Although, fake news exists. There are manipulative people, organizations, and actors, no pun intended, that are going to use people's sensitivity of race and people's compassion against them, and that is evil.
You're the biggest asshole walking God's green earth.
These are the tactics of abusers.
The age of information comes at a cost. Some companies have so much power that they would be the envy of the most brutal tyrants of all time. They like to embellish stories and support narratives rather than inform. In a world filled with clickbait, likes, hashtags, and trending topics, it really is your job to make sure you're getting a balanced version of the news and not a curated version, and they count on you to not do that.
Defend yourself.
Look, I don't tolerate bullshit terribly well.